Jnanatimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayamrita Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gora Tushe Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so today we will be resuming our study of this chapter. We will be concluding our study of chapter 10 after our study of the Chatur Shloki last week. As you will remember, we went over the Chatur Shloki. I went a little bit deeper into the texts than I normally do. Normally Bhakti-śāstrī is an overview, but as I said, there was two reasons why I wanted to go a little more intensely into it. And those two reasons are, well, I guess you could say three reasons. One is that the Chatur Shloki is one of the open book questions. So I wanted to give you all a lot of food to think about, right? But the other one is that the Chatur Shloki is very, very deep, but sometimes on the face of it, it seems to be like the rest of the texts. I wanted to show how deep you can go, and you can go that deep with all of the texts of the Gita, really. All of them you can go in that much detail, but we just don't have the time to. So every once in a while, I want to show that. That's why in our discussion of Manmana Bhava Madbhakto, my comments were very brief. When we see that text again in chapter 18, we will have a more thorough discussion of that text as well. So we discussed all of that. Oh, and then lastly, I wanted to show how it is the most confidential knowledge, all of that sort of really esoteric high stuff. It's all there in the Gita. So having had discussed that, now I would like to continue going. We're going to do the second half of the 10th chapter. There's not going to be many slides for this section of the Gita. And that's not because I'm lazy, although maybe it is as well. But it's because for this section of the Gita, I don't really want to have too many images on the screen. This part of the Gita is incredibly visual. It's incredibly vivid. All of the Gita has been very pretty and beautiful, but especially from this second half of the 10th chapter, all the way through the 11th chapter, it's very poetic, right? There's a lot of imagery, there's a lot of poetry that's going on. So for this section, again, the second half of the 10th chapter, and for a significant chunk of the 11th chapter, I'm going to put less slides up, and I'll even not share my screen. I'd like us to really visualize the text as we're going along. My spiritual master, he often says this. When we see the long sections of poetry in Srimad Bhagavatam, when we see them even in Bhagavad-Gita, he didn't say Gita, but it applies just as much to the Gita. It's not that it's been given just because Vyasadeva had a certain amount of 1,000 shlokas that he needed to reach, or Shukadev Goswami rather, before it would be considered Srimad Bhagavatam. We can consider the Srimad Bhagavatam we have is heavily edited, right? They gave the most condensed version they could, not the most expanded version. And it's same with the Gita, right? The Gita is short, 700 words for Krishna to give so much knowledge. So when we are seeing these sort of sections, they're there for us to visualize. They're there for us to meditate upon, right? All of it is for us to do that, right? But especially when it becomes poetic, these images are being created so that we can recreate them in our minds. They're being given so that we can dwell on them, right? So in this section, as we go through, as always, hopefully everyone can have their Gitas out with them. If you don't have your Gita, I'll give you 2 seconds to run and grab it. But yeah, I'm going to put less visual stimuli. Please try to visualize everything as we're going through it. Visualize the descriptions that are given. Visualize the analogies, right? Visualize what each one means. For some things, those might be a little bit difficult, but I think, again, with the more poetic sections, we really should dwell on the metaphors. So that's just a little heads up, because I'll stop sharing my screen at times, because I won't have slides for that specific section. And that was intentionally done. It's not that my internet is giving out or something. Okay, so with that being said, let us continue then our reading of the Bhagavad-Gita. We got up to the very end of the Chaturshloki, and after it being spoken, we will then hear the response now. And we've made a big deal about the response, and there is good reason for that. So I will recite the Sanskrit, and maybe we can have Srikanta Sena Prabhu. Would you like to say the English? Yeah? Okay. Yep. So let's go. Because it's text 12 and 13 together, obviously I'll recite them together. Arjuna uvacha param brahma param dhama pavitram paramam bhavan purusham shashvatam divyam adidevam ajam vibhum ahustvam rishaya sarve devarshir naradas tatha asito devalo vyasaha swayam chaiva bravishime.
Translation: Arjuna said, "You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You are the eternal, transcendental, original person, the unborn, the greatest." All the great sages, such as Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyas, confirmed this truth about you, and now you yourself are declaring it to me.
So, how wonderful again. So what is Arjuna's response? What is Arjuna's response to what we have heard, right? And this is a very, very significant thing we should meditate upon. I've made a lot of emphasis about how at this point, if you peek forward at text 14, Arjuna says, now I've accepted this, right? I've made a big point about this, but there's also another significant point to be made in Arjuna's response. Not only was Arjuna silent, right? Silent for so long, right? We were so used to the back and forth. But when we are hearing this highest knowledge, Arjuna, he remains mute, right? He is mute in light of the grand transcendental knowledge he is hearing. But not only that, but what is his first response? His first response isn't, I agree. His first response isn't, oh, okay, this is correct. His first response is, oh, what is the glory of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? His first response is worship. His first response is admiration. And this is the point of this transcendental knowledge. The point of the knowledge is that it brings us to worship. Why is Krishna explaining his opulences? For fun, right? Is he explaining it so that Arjuna can understand some philosophy? No, he's explaining it so that Arjuna can go deeper into his devotion. And therefore, what is the first response that Arjuna gives? Param Brahma, Param Dhama, right? You are the greatest. Glorification, right? You see the same thing in, I love it, in Gaur Ganadesha Deepika. I remember I was hearing a class, Bhakti Vikash Maharaj, he was saying, there's sometimes a debate. What is the nature of Sri Navadvip Dham? Is Navadvip Vrindavan? Is Navadvip Vaikuntha? Is Navadvip Shvetadvip, right? Which one of these is the identity of Navadvip? And Kavi Karnapur, he writes, he lists all the different opinions, all the different options. And then right at the end, where you would be expecting a conclusion, where you would be expecting him to say, actually, it is this. What does he write? He says, all glories to Sri Navadvip Dham, right? Ultimately, this should be our response to all of these things, right? To rejoice in the glories and wonders of all of these things. This is the natural response, right? And this is the appropriate response. And therefore, from Arjuna, we see something very, very pertinent, right? What is the appropriate use of this knowledge? Again, we are so used to learning things in the sort of Western system, right? No matter where you grew up, it's everything's taught in that Western system, post-enlightenment Western system, where it's all about knowing and it's not about doing, right? We learn information so that we can understand it. But in the Vedic understanding, we learn information so that we can realize it, so that we can implement it, so that we can do it, right? And so we must do this knowledge. And again, what is Arjuna's response? Glorification, worship, and then he settles in, right? Okay, and what does he say? Param Brahma, Param Dhama, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavan, right? Param Brahma, Param Dhama, right? What does he say? You are the highest, right? Param means the greatest. So Param Brahma, the greatest transcendental, right? The absolute truth, all of these things. Again, as we've already discussed, this is not just the Gauriya Vaishnav sectarian conception that Krishna is the supreme form, okay? Param Brahma is not he's not mincing words. He's not speaking indirectly. It's very direct what he's saying. But what is he also saying? Param Dhama, right? Krishna, he is not complete unless he is there with his dham as well. So, again, we have another aspect that we must understand of Krishna. Firstly, Krishna is absolute, right? There is no difference between Krishna, his form, his qualities, his pastimes, or his dham, right? All of these things, they are together. There is no difference between Krishna and his body. There's no difference between all of these things, right? Krishna is absolute. But secondly, Krishna is also not complete. I'm just reading Srikanta Sena Prabhu's question. Arjuna. Yeah, those are different ways of rendering the term. That's all that I can say, because some acharyas comment upon it as sustenance. I'm just reading through my notes on the word dhama. If any of you can't see, Srikanta Sena Prabhu is asking about the word for word rendering about the word dhama. But others render it as supreme abode. So I guess it depends. Yeah, it's one of those things where the word has multiple levels of meaning. Yeah, but good point. So yeah, so you have all of these things, right? So the Supreme Lord is absolute. And furthermore, in the Dham, what is in the Dham? In the Dham, there is the Lord and there is his associates. The Lord is not complete without his associates. When we hear about the fullness of Krishna, we hear that there are 4 sweet qualities in Nectar of Devotion. I will beat you all over the head with them, okay? You will all be forced to memorize these. These are absolutely necessary, okay? To understand the 4 specific glories of Krishna that Rupa Goswami lists that makes Krishna higher than all of the other forms of the Supreme Lord. Can anyone tell me what those 4 are? Does anyone know already? Srikanta Sena Prabhu is going to share. He's first going to Google it, and then he'll...
I'm trying to find my mute button. The shun signing on the screen, so it's hard to. So it's Lila madhurya.
Yeah.
Meaning the sweetness of his pastimes. He's Rupa madhurya, meaning the sweetness of his form, of his threefold bending form. His Venu madhurya, which is the sweetness of his flute playing. And the last one is, I've forgotten the last one.
He has sweet associates, right? And that's the one that I was waiting for, right? But thank you, Prabhu. So everyone will be memorizing them in Sanskrit, even like Prabhu has, if we're feeling brave. But at the very least, please remember the concepts of these four. These four only Krishna has. Only Krishna has these four, and these are what make him the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Again, we will touch upon that more in Nectar of Devotion. But the last one is that he has beautiful associates, right? He has beautiful devotees running around with him. This is an essential part of the Supreme Lord, right? An essential part. This is what makes Krishna unique. The glories.
What's the Sanskrit of that one?
I'm trying to remember it now. I can't remember.
Don't worry, Prabhu, we'll forget it. Yeah.
No, it's all right. I've never remembered to begin with. No. The other ones are easy because it's Lila, Rupa, Venu, but I forgot the Sanskrit word. It's a little bit less obvious than the other ones. Then Venu, Lila, Rupa. I'll get back to you after the class. I'll try and remember. It's in Chaitanya Charitamrita as well. You'll find there. Okay. So, like this, we find the Supreme Lord, he is only complete when he is there with his devotees, right? Okay, all of these things. So, Arjuna, he has very appropriately responded with all of these details. For the sake of time, we won't go much longer into Arjuna's response because we want to hear the second part of this 10th chapter. Okay, so let's keep going then. Let us have the next text. Let's have Vishaka Mataji can say the Sanskrit the English for text 14. Oh, I've gone in the opposite direction I wanted to. Yep. Sarvametadritam manye yanmam vadasi Keshava nahite bhagavan vyaktim vidurdeva nadanavaha.
O Krishna, I totally accept as truth all that you have told me. Neither the demigods nor the demons, O Lord, can understand your personality.
Jai. So again, we're continuing with the similar theme, right? We've been discussing how no one can understand Krishna, right? Remember, we had a lot of discussion about that. We talked about different levels of knowledge. We talked about all these sort of things. And then now Krishna has understood how you can know about Krishna. And what does Arjuna say, right? He confirms this. No one can, before we were saying no one knows about Krishna. And Krishna is saying, no one knows about me. And now what is Arjuna saying? All of these people don't know, but I now know, right? And so this is the purport, right? And so in this sense now, Arjuna has accepted the Bhagavad-Gītā. What is the point of the rest of the Bhagavad-Gītā then, right? What is the point of it? Does anyone know? Prabhupada mentions this in one of the purports. If Arjuna has already accepted the knowledge, okay, Haribol, let's close it up. You know, the 10 chapters of the Bhagavad-Gītā. After 10 chapters, Arjuna is convinced and then he goes and fights in the battle, right? Isn't that what happens? After hearing this, Arjuna says, okay, I'll fight. He runs out into the battlefield and there's our 10 chapters of Bhagavad-Gītā, right? Is that the case? No, right? We have a few more chapters. Or maybe some of you got excited. We've finished the course, Haribol, right? No, right? We still got a few more chapters left. But what is does anyone remember? Prabhupada actually, he mentions it in the purport. It's almost like a passing comment. But why do we have another 8 chapters? Why do we have a whole other module to study after this? If Arjuna says, I totally accept as truth all that you have told me. He's not saying I partially accept it. So we can't say, oh, Arjuna needed more convincing. What does he say? I totally accept.
I think Prabhu, he accepted it probably, but he was not satisfied. Perhaps that's why it continued. He wanted more of it, but something must have been missing that he said, yeah, I like intellectual level, yeah, I got all of that.
Yeah, well, definitely he wants more of it, right? But he is in one sense satisfied in that he's compelled, because again, how does Prabhupada translate it? I totally accept, right? If you are a little bit unsatisfied to one level, you will say, I accept, right? Or I kind of accept. Or okay, Prabhu, right? But you don't say, I totally accept, if you don't have any more objections. But you are correct. That is one aspect of it, in that he is not totally satisfied. But it's not that he's intellectually not satisfied. Instead, we are never fully satisfied about hearing about Krishna, right? So that is one reason. And actually, that one isn't even in the purports, it's in the texts. Arjuna says that, how can we ever be satisfied hearing about your glories? So you're correct. He's not fully satisfied in hearing the beauty of Krishna. Okay, somebody has sent a message. Maybe they will have the other reason. Yes, Rohan Prabhu is our commentary acharya, and he has shared that, that it's to benefit all of the others. Prabhupada mentions this in the purport. Arjuna, he is asking questions for the benefit of all the others who will hear, right? For the benefit not only of all the others who will hear on the battlefield necessarily, but for the benefit of all of the people who will receive this knowledge of Bhagavad-Gītā later on, right? So Arjuna now, he is asking and probing all of this for the benefit of the people who are not convinced by this point, right? So those are the twofold reasons. Firstly, Arjuna continues asking because, again, he wants to keep hearing. Sometimes we hear, I remember once there was one youth group that was being run, and we were choosing which book to read together, right? And I remember I said a nice book for us to read would be Ishopanishad, right? And one of the other devotees in the group, they said, "Oh, I've already read Ishopanishad. We don't need to read it." This is not the attitude we have to the glories of the Supreme Lord, right? It is not that I read Ishopanishad once when I was 10 years old and my parents forced me to, or it's not I read it once out of my own free will a year ago, right? We want to continuously be hearing these things. I remember in one class, Sevamrita, His Holiness Sevamrita Swami Maharaj, he was giving a class, and I forgot exactly what the context was. It was like this passing comment. He was saying about how he's like on his 56th reading, I think, of Chaitanya Charitamrita, or something insane like that, right? And he was saying even this, over half a century in terms of read-throughs, right? Over 50 readings, and still it's like reading it the first time. Going to have to read it as part of this course. Yes, unfortunately for all of us, after we've read Ishopanishad once, we can all never read it again according to that logic. But thankfully, we have a higher logic than that. We have the logic of Arjuna, right? Which is that we're constantly relishing it, right? So Ishopanishad is very smaller than Chaitanya Charitamrita, okay? It's much, much smaller. So it's also a whole lot easier to do. But I'm thinking of Sevamrita Maharaj's words. And we should really hold that to be our aspiration. It is both in the sense that the knowledge is very deep. We will never take away all the knowledge that we can from even one text of one book, right? You take one shloka, you spend your whole life studying it, you will not exhaust the knowledge that is available there. But also, even then, we are so obsessed with knowledge. Even greater than knowledge is simply hearing the glories of the Lord. The devotees love to hear it again and again and again, right? You think how many times Prabhupada, he is giving Bhagavatam classes, and what is he saying? He's saying Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, chant Hare Krishna, right? How many times, how much does Srila Prabhupada know, but how much is he relishing just saying these things, right? We think of them as the basics, right? But they're so deep. We should relish hearing them again and again, simply for their beauty, right? Okay, so this is the attitude in our study. And Arjuna is going to discuss a little bit more about that. Of course, we'll keep on going. I've already discussed about the meaning of Keshava in chapter 1 of the Bhagavad-Gita. If you can't remember, you can go back to the notes for that. But Keshava, Prabhupada, he discusses how that actually refers to various. Actually, does Prabhupada or Baladev Vidyabhushan? One of the two, they refer to how Keshava can refer to the three demigods as well. So we'll notice that Krishna has been referred to as Keshava, and Keshava can also mean, it can mean one with beautiful hair, it can mean a few other things, but it can also mean he who is the Lord of Brahma and Shiva, right? So Arjuna, he is reinforcing this point. Okay, now let's go on to text 15. let's have Sri Mataji say the English. Svayam evatmanatmanam vetatvam purushottama bhuta bhavana bhutesha deva deva jagatpate.
Indeed, you alone know yourself by your own internal potency, O Supreme Person, origin of all, Lord of all beings, God of gods, Lord of the universe.
Jai, Jai. So I've written this out. This is basically the purport, but I've written it out in this way. Screenshot it or write it into your notes. This is a very wonderful text. To my knowledge, it's not there in your shloka list. I don't think it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but please, please memorize this one. Add it to your shloka list informally. I won't test you for it, but I'll give you bonus marks if you can recite it. This is a very nice one for preaching, right? This is a very, very nice one for preaching, because if you memorize it, you can follow this logic in order to demonstrate the unique position of Krishna, right? With each one of these titles, you can demonstrate the very unique, with this one shloka, right? Of course, you can say, Aham sarvasya prabhavo, right? But this one, so systematically, you can guide someone through, no matter which point they're at in understanding the position of Krishna. If you learn this text, you can go through each one of these names and you can guide through Krishna's specific qualities, right? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he writes that actually all of this is simply an elaboration on what it means to be Purushottama, right? So you have Purushottama, and what does Purushottama mean? It means the Supreme Person. What does it mean to be the Supreme Person? It means all of these things. He's Bhutesha, the Supreme Controller of everyone, the Bhuta Bhavana, right? The Father of all living entities. So, okay. So in this way, we should internalize this text. Again, the names, they are not just willy-nilly being told for fun and games. Okay, let's keep on going. Let's get a decent rate going. I want to get to the vibhutis, right? Of the Vibhuti Yoga section. I want to get to them before we go on our 5-minute break. Okay, next text, let's have Rohan Prabhu can say the English. Vaktum arhasya sheshena divyahyatma vibhutayaha yabhir vibhutibhir lokan imam stvam vyapya tishtasi.
Please tell me in detail of your divine opulences by which you pervade all these worlds.
Jai. And then let's do text 17 as well. Maybe we can have Tanya Mataji can say the English. Katham vidyam aham yogim stvam sada parichintayan keshu keshu cha bhaveshu chintyosi bhagavan maya.
Sorry, did you say text 17?
Text 17, yes.
O Krishna, O Supreme Mystic, how shall I constantly think of you? And how shall I know you? In what various forms are you to be remembered, O Supreme Personality of Godhead?
Okay, so Arjuna now, he asks this central question. And with this question, we conclude chapter 10, right? Not our study of it, but this is where Krishna gives his conclusive points. And they go on for a while, right? And what are those points? What Arjuna is asking is he's saying, okay, you are saying, right? Aham sarvasya prabhavo. What does it mean? Aham sarvasya prabhavo means everything, right? I am the source of everything. Everything is emanating from me. What does this mean? If everything is coming from you, you are the center, right? In linguistics, people figure out where all the languages come from by the area which has all the languages in it, right? If you have a place where all the language families are in, this will say, this is where the language originally comes from, right? Because that is the point upon which, that is the center, right? That's where it's all coming out from, right? And therefore they'll say, this is the center of the language, right? In the same with all reality, Krishna, he is the center. All of it is coming out from him. all of the, if you take a circle and you take it the straight line, right? The origin from all of the edges, it's the center. The center is which connects all of it, right? If we think of a wheel, right? The spokes of the wheel are all coming out from the center, right? The center, Krishna, he is establishing himself as being the center of existence. In this material world, all of us, we like to think we're the center. I know I love to think I'm the center, right? But Krishna is the actual center, and we are pointing towards him. But what does this mean? Aham sarvasya prabhavo, right? If this is the case, then how can we see this? How does the world relate to Krishna, right? This is what Arjuna is asking. You are saying your opulences, right? And that's why this chapter is called Vibhuti Yoga. You've mentioned your opulences. You've mentioned how unknowable they are. You've mentioned your relation to the world. Now tell me in detail, right? I've asked about this in principle. Now tell me this in detail. And what this will end up having is we'll end up having the very, very famous section, right? Of so-and-so's I am, of X's I am Y, right? Of secrets, I am silence, right? Of planetary bodies, I am the sun, right? Like this, Krishna, he will be describing. And this is very reminiscent of a certain type of worship, a certain type of religion that we see in the world, often called animism, right? Animism is often what we associate with the more tribal religions, if we want to be a little bit generic, if we want to generalize a tiny bit, right? And animism is when one sees divinity in the world around them, right? You'll see it in Japan as well, Shintoism. They'll have shrines, right? For this is the sacred thing here, this is a sacred spirit here, this is a sacred spirit there, right? It's seeing the world around you and seeing it as having all these little sacred things in them. And we often think of it almost in a sense as a lower form of religion, right? And maybe we will think about it in that way. But in this chapter, Krishna, and in this section, Krishna will really reinforce that this is a positive way of seeing him. It's not the fullness of seeing him, but it's not that we should see that and see that as a low thing. To a degree, we can affirm animism because Krishna is present in terms of his glories, in terms of everything, right? When we're walking around the world, right, we should see it all in relationship to Krishna. And that is the beauty of what Krishna is explaining in these texts that we are about to begin, right? When he says, of so-and-so, I am this, we should think, whenever we see so-and-so, we should think of Krishna, right? And we should think, wow, this is how Krishna is here. When we see the sky, we should see the sun and think that is Krishna. Don't look directly into the sun, but we should see the sun and know that this is Krishna, right? Like this, Krishna's presence can be experienced. This is something very practically as well. I know for me with my chanting, if I'm outside chanting, I find it's sometimes if I'm not at the temple, it was a little bit difficult in COVID time, but these days I try to be outside while I'm chanting, because when you're outside, if you really think that I'm surrounded by the energies of Krishna, you can feel Krishna's presence everywhere. You can notice Krishna's everywhere, right? And when you do that, your chanting can become very deep, right? You can really immerse yourself in the fact that these are all the opulences of Krishna. What I'm seeing around me is not something that's keeping me away from Krishna. Krishna is present here. I'm situated in Krishna's energies. These trees here are Krishna's energies, right? And when we see something that is particularly opulent, we can take that as being a representation of Krishna. It said once His Holiness Tripurari Swami was visiting the redwood trees. And if you don't know the redwood trees, these are trees in America that are thousands and thousands of years old. Very, 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 very ancient, majestic trees. They're huge and they're very, very opulent. And it's said that Tripurari Maharaj, when he saw the redwood trees, he turned around and he said, of trees, I am the redwood tree, right? Obviously not speaking about himself, making a reference to how Krishna would speak, right? And he was saying, you know, if Krishna was here right now speaking the Bhagavad-Gītā, he would say, of trees, I'm the redwood tree, right? So when we read these texts, again, we're one or two texts away from doing it. We shouldn't think that we are reading these texts as being like this very In one sense, it is very philosophical commentary, but we shouldn't think that we are reading them in the sense that they are there to make these specific points, right? That Krishna is these things and then he is nothing else, right? It is not that these are the specific ones. There's a general principle being made. We should also understand that of trees, Krishna is a redwood tree, right? Of these things, Krishna is that. Krishna, he is emphasizing that he is the greatest of all of these things, right? So everything is Krishna's opulence, and specifically the greatest of all things is where we can find Krishna represented. I mentioned a few weeks ago, but I'll mention it again. Srila Prabhupada was once, one of his disciples once said, Srila Prabhupada, I feel that I am the most small of all the living entities. And Prabhupada said, you are not the most of anything, right? Because Krishna is the most of everything, right? Another time, another one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples said, Srila Prabhupada, whenever I'm there among all my God brothers, I feel like I'm the smallest of my God brothers, right? I'm the smallest of all of them. They are all so much greater than me. And Srila Prabhupada said, everyone is small compared to Krishna, right? So like this, we should understand, right? This text is not, these texts are not the only glory. We should understand the underlying message. In fact, maybe we can even think of it. If we're in a situation where we can't connect these texts in particular to remind us of Krishna, we should think, which one of these is Krishna's opulence, right? You'll see a group of people and you see the leader of the group. You should think of this group of people, that leader there is Krishna, right? Not because literally that leader is Krishna. In one sense, it is a chinta bheda bheda, right? They are an energy of Krishna, right? But also in the sense that their opulence is representing that they are the greatest of that. Okay? But we shouldn't turn that around and then worship that person as Krishna, right? We should take that person as stimulus to worship Krishna. Or we should take that item or object as stimulus to worship Krishna, right? That is the distinction. That is why we're not animistic, okay? So in this way, we can use the world as a motive, as an encouragement for our Krishna consciousness. And that is what these texts are coming out for. These are actually some of the most practical texts, even though some of them are a little impractical to us because we do live in a different world than this Gita was spoken in, right? Okay, so I'll say the Sanskrit then for text 18. Then we will very quickly begin the opulences. Okay, this, let's have Bhumi-gītā Mataji can say the English. Vistarenat mano yogam vibhutim cha janardana bhuya kathaya triptirhi shrinvato nasti me mritam.
O Janardana, again please describe in detail the mystic power of your opulences. I'm never satiated in hearing about you, for the more I hear, the more I want to taste the nectar of your words. Hare Krishna.
Jai. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary says that at this point Arjuna is basically begging, right? Because what Krishna, he's teasing him. Krishna, he is talking about his opulences, but he is not mentioning them. He is saying, oh, I'm very opulent, but he is not speaking those glories, right? And so at this point, Arjuna, he is hankering for that nectar. He is begging for the nectar. He's saying, please give me this nectar. Krishna, you have mentioned it so much. You've mentioned it so much. Please give me this nectar. Basically, he's begging at this point, okay? And then what does the Supreme Personality of Godhead say? Then we hear the beginning of this very famous final section. Maybe we can have Uma Devi, Mataji, can say the English. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Hantate Kathayishyami Divyayatma Vibhutaya Pradhanyata Guru Shreshta Nastyanto Vistarasya Me.
Translation.
Yeah.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, yes, I will tell you of my splendorous manifestations, but only of those which are prominent. O Arjuna, for my opulence is limitless. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Jai. Thank you. So very nicely here, the yes is there. Purijan Prabhu, he says that this yes is, even though it doesn't seem to us, it's a way of expressing intimacy. Krishna is being very intimate, right? Hanta is the word, right? So it's a way of affirming, right? Purijan Prabhu gives a nice way of rendering it, right? Oh yes, I will speak about my opulences, right? So Krishna is expressing his affection. And what is he saying? Again, he's making that point that I was making, right? My opulences are limitless. Do not think that this is the list of Krishna's opulences, right? We should always be looking for more and more opulences like this, right? If any of us have realizations like off the trees, I'm the redwood tree, right? We should really hunger for those, right? Let us try to see where is the opulence of Krishna manifest in the world around us, right? I'm not saying in a mental speculating way, of course, and please don't add whatever realization you find to your Gita edition, but rather this is giving a nice format, right, for our meditation, okay? Very, very practical section. Let's have our 5-minute break now though, and then we will come back to finish this off. Before you all go though, I do want to say for the next section, please have your Gitas out. I will stop sharing the screen and we're going to go relatively quickly through them because there's a lot of them. So I'm going to quickly say names. Please have your Gita ready to read out the English because I'm just going to go quickly through all of them. It's going to be a bit of rapid fire. Okay, Hare Krishna. I'll see you all at 11:07. I'll see some of you have to go. Okay, so everyone should have their Gitas in front of them. I'll say the Sanskrit for this first one, and the reason why is what has Krishna said in text 19? What of these opulences, which ones is he mentioning? Which ones is he discussing? Just read, it's in text 19.
The prominent ones.
The prominent ones, yes. But another way of translating this is that he is going to convey them. He's going to discuss them in order of the most prominent, right? And this is the case. The most prominent one is the first one that we read about. And which one is that? Aham atma gudakesh sarva bhuta shaya stitaha. 1 second. Aham adischa madhyam cha bhutanam anta eva cha. Okay, maybe Divyansh Prabhu can say the English.
I am the super soul, O Arjuna, seated in the hearts of all living entities. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all beings.
Yes, right. So this is the ultimate opulence of Krishna, right? This is the ultimate opulence that we can see in the material world, of course. So these are all vibhutis. Vibhutis, these are the various variegated opulences of the Lord, right? And so this is the ultimate one that we can witness. And what is that? That the Supreme Lord is the super soul. He is the heart of all existence, right? He is situated within this material world and he's situated at the hearts of all living entities. We know that there's 3 levels of Paramatma. We'll discuss this more another time. Have I already discussed this with you? I'm sure I've brought it up before, that there are the 3 Paramatmas. There's the Paramatma in the heart, there's the Paramatma in the center of the universe, and there's the Paramatma of all existence. Those are the 3 levels of I've definitely discussed this before. But so we can take this text as referring it to any of these 3 levels. In all these ways, the Supreme Lord, he is pervading all existence, right? Because what does it say? He is pervading all things, right? So in all of these different ways, he is situated, right? He's situated in all of matter as that Mahavishnu, right? He's situated pervading each universe in the form of Garbho Dakashayi Vishnu. And then in forms of Kshiro Dakashayi Vishnu, he's in the hearts of everyone. And in this way, Krishna is all pervading, right? So there we find this is the greatest and most pervading opulence of Krishna, right? And because of that, he is the beginning, middle, and end of all things, right? Because he pervades all things in this Vishnu Paramatma form. They are created in him, they exist in him, and they end in him. And therefore, this is the greatest opulence, the very manifestation of this universe, and its very destruction is all simply the opulence of Krishna. You cannot get more opulent than the very existence of this entire material existence. Okay? And therefore, this is the greatest opulence. As I said, we'll go quickly ahead. Maybe I won't do the Sanskrit, because again, it's 20 shlokas. I'll just say names and we can go through the English. Okay, Vidhi Mataji, text 21, if you could, please.
Yes, Prabhu. Of the Adityas, I am Vishnu. Of lights, I am the radiant sun. Of the Maruts, I am Marichi. And among the stars, I am the moon.
Jai. Okay, so this is a very famous text. So actually, I might have a slide for this one. I'm just trying to think if we have time to discuss this. Okay, maybe we will. Let's have Shivam Prabhu. Could you read out the purport?
Of 21?
Yeah.
There are 12 Adityas, of which Krishna is a principal. Among all the luminaries shining in the sky, the sun is the chief, and the Brahma Samhita, the sun is accepted as the glowing eye of the Supreme Lord. There are 50 varieties of wind blowing in space, and of these winds, the controlling deity, Maharishi, represents Krishna. Among the stars, the moon is the most prominent at night, and thus the moon represents Krishna. It appears from this verse that the moon is one of the stars. Therefore, the stars that twinkle in the sky also reflect the light of the sun. The theory that there are many suns within the universe is not accepted by Vedic literature. The sun is one, and as by the reflection of the sun, the moon illuminates, so also do the stars. Since Bhagavad-Gītā indicates herein that the moon is one of the stars, the twinkling stars are not suns, but are similar to the moon.
Jai. JWST, and I don't know what the JWST is. Otherwise,
the James Webb Space Telescope.
Oh yeah. That big photo everyone was sharing on their Facebook feeds. Yeah, Haribo. Okay, so I wanted to read that just because in Bhakti-śāstrī, I think it's a nice opportunity for us to. It's not that I love controversy or anything, but I do think it's a nice opportunity for us to dwell on the more difficult sections, right? So that's just why I'm raising it. And I think this is probably one of the harder ones. I think there are lots of people I'm sure we can all see the difficulties with this passage, right? With this purport. A little bit confronting, right? Can anyone not see it? Can anyone explain like what the confusion might be there?
I think the confusion maybe people might say, oh, well, moon is not really a star. Well, the context is actually, they're talking about what is glowing in the night. Is the best, hence the best.
That's in the text, but then in the purport, Prabhupada says that I totally reject the idea that the stars are suns. So Prabhupada seems very Prabhupada seems not to be happy to let us get out that easily, right? Okay, I will take some time to discuss this, and then we will. Me too. No, I don't think the earth is flat or anything. But okay, so firstly, this text I think is interesting for a few reasons. One is to show us, and this is going to get a little bit dry for those of you who are not into manuscripts and stuff like that. You're going to get a little bored here. But I remember doing some research on this when I was younger, and I was going through the old editions of the Gita. There's one edition that I don't have up here, but that's all right. And what's interesting is this helps us see how the Bhagavad-Gītā as it is has been compiled. What I have here in the white writing here, this is the 1972 edition of the Bhagavad-Gītā, right? What I have here in the middle is Jayadvaita Swami's original annotated version. So the edition we have is the version that Jayadvaita Swami created while editing the 1972. And that's that in the middle here, right? This is his copy where he's actually putting in the changes that is in the edition that you're holding in your hands, right? So you can see here, he's writing in here, he's writing in there. And on the furthest on the right, up here, this is the original transcript. So this is somebody who was listening to Prabhupada speak out the text, and he would type it out, right? Okay, so the way that this text was compiled was that this one on the right, on the far right here, this one was typed out. Then Hayagriva Prabhu, he wrote, he put it out neatly and nicely as the Bhagavad-Gita as it is. He did the original round of editing. Jayadvaita Maharaj then went and corrected a lot of the mistakes that Hayagriva Prabhu had made in compiling the text, right? Because if we see the original flow of the argument, it's a little bit different than how it is in the current text. And I'm not saying that to undermine the current text, but rather it's interesting how we see the development of the idea. Firstly, sometimes people accuse the new edition of the Bhagavad-Gita as it is for trying to appease people, for trying to be a little bit more, it's not authentically Prabhupada. But what we actually see here is if we compare our current editions to the 1972, which I have here on the left, you'll notice, what does it say? Among luminaries twinkling in the sky, the sun is the chief. And in the Brahma Samhita, the sun is accepted as a glowing effulgence of the Supreme Lord and is considered to be one of his eyes. Among the stars, the moon is most prominent at night, and thus the moon represents Krishna. There's no mention of the stars are not suns, right? There's no mention of it at all in the 1972. If we look, and again, I apologize if this sort of stuff isn't your cup of tea, because this is it's a little full on. But if we look on the far right, this is the original transcript of what Srila Prabhupada said. What does he say? He says that the sun is one, and as many reflections, so and so. Bhagavad-Gita indicates herein that the moon is one of the stars, and the twinkling stars are not the suns, but are similar to the moon. So, 2 points I want to make. Firstly, I want to make the point that it's not true that our current edition is trying to make things more believable, nor is it true that it's taking things away. It's genuinely trying to go closer to what Srila Prabhupada originally said. Does that make sense? So when we have the current editions of the Gita, we shouldn't think, oh, it's been edited so many times, yada, yada, they're taking things out, whatever. It's bringing it closer and closer to the original words of Srila Prabhupada. Clearly, Hayagriva Prabhu, when he was editing, felt that this was a little bit of a challenging comment by Prabhupada and just thought, I better not put it in, right? And Jayadvaita Maharaj just sort of gone back and said, okay, no, let's include all of the comments Srila Prabhupada made. So that's in terms of understanding how this text has come about. Furthermore, though, I actually feel like the wording is clearer in the original, if you read the manuscript, where you see that Prabhupada is making the point that the sun is one, and as by the reflections of the sun, the moon illuminates, so also do the stars. Since Bhagavad-Gita indicates here and that the moon is one of the stars, the twinkling stars are not suns, but are similar to the moon. Okay, there's this extra mention of like the theory that there are many suns within the universe is not accepted by the Vedic literature, right? So this flows a little bit clearer. He's making the point that there is only one sun, there are not many suns. There is this addition of questions of solar system and all. Anyways, I won't get into that. Let's get into this text. This is, again, a difficult one. Many people have different ways of reconciling it, of trying to understand it. Is everyone finding me stop? No, I'll leave the screen share up for now. So with this, firstly, I want to make one general point. We can get really caught up in these texts. If you remember, I said we're not going to have slides so we can visualize this. Please do not forget that the main point of this text is not so much to illustrate cosmology. It is there to illustrate that when you look at the sky, you should think of Krishna. That is the first point. Let's not forget the main point of texts like these, okay? The main point is that it's meant to increase our remembrance of Krishna. Okay, That's the first point I want to make. So if we feel disturbed by this, we should still remember that this is here. Now, I also don't want to just dismiss it though, because Srila Prabhupada has mentioned it. It is there. And it's not just that we say, okay, this is difficult, so I'm going to retreat away, right? Okay. So that's the first point I want to make. In healthy doses, let us remember that the main point is to remember Krishna, okay? Secondly now, I'm not actually going to solve this question for us. And that might seem a little bit cruel because I'm the one who's raised it. I actually don't know any thorough answers that I could get into that really are too compelling. Sometimes people say, well, maybe by universe, Prabhupada means different solar systems, right? Maybe that's because obviously words don't have to fully translate, right? And I'm not sure, has anyone ever heard that explanation before? By universe, Prabhupada means solar system. But this is not a viable solution because in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada, he explicitly says that we only ever see the light from our universe because our universe is covered by many layers, like a shell, right? For those of you who don't know, there's the different, all of the elements are there, and it makes like an egg around our universe, right? And so Prabhupada says, Prabhupada literally says, if somebody were to say that we are seeing the suns from other universes, this is impossible. And the reason why this is impossible is because there is a layer of every element surrounding us, and that would block the light. So difficulty. Yes, those are some extra Bhagavatam complications as well. And we can talk about all sorts of things, right? And also, because people will define what a universe is. So the layers are covering our solar system. Well, that's what we might think. But what Prabhupada seems to indicate here is that the stars we see in the sky are not different suns. They are actually other stars, right? This is what is indicated by Prabhupada here. Because if they were other solar systems, then we wouldn't be able to see them. Because what is the definition of a universe? If you go to the Bhagavatam, and again, this is Vedic cosmology. I apologize for those who find Vedic cosmology boring. But when we see the Bhagavatam's definition of a universe, the Bhagavatam's definition of a universe is that where the sunlight pervades. When the sun's light stops pervading it, that is one universe. So by definition, we could not be seeing the light of another universe's sun. So definitionally, there's an issue here. Okay. So there's many different solutions that are given by devotees. If I'm going to be absolutely honest, I don't find any in particular to be flawless, right? If I'm going to be absolutely honest, and I hate to say stuff like this and give you all an existential crisis, I think they make sense, don't get me wrong. And I think because the rest of Krishna consciousness makes so much sense, I'm happy to accept that, it's just a little bit beyond my mental capacity. But all that I'm saying is that all of the solutions seem to be a little bit complicated, right? All of them seem to be a little bit complex and nuanced, and none of them seem to be, here is a clear, easy solution, right? Which, mind you, is also what astronomers have today. You might have heard of dark matter, which astronomers talk about. And dark matter is basically this idea that there's some matter that's invisible, we can't see it, but it's there, right? And the reason why dark matter is proposed is because all of our mathematical models of astronomy don't make sense. So what they've done is they've theorized that there's this black matter that's out there, right? In order to make their equations work. So everyone is kind of having these complex things. At the end of the day, it's very hard to grasp cosmology. Even at the end of the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, what is said, Shukadev Goswami, he says, this is my attempt at conveying what the experts of today say, right? He's not particularly saying that it's easy to grasp these things. Okay, that's all right, Sevamrita Mataji. I would leave too if I was hearing a cosmology discussion. So again, cosmology is not everyone's cup of tea, but I do want to address it here. And then I promise we will not discuss cosmology again for the rest of this class, okay? This course, it's only relevant now. We will not touch upon it again. No, Srikanta Sena really likes cosmology. Okay, so now what do we do? Again, we would take forever to discuss cosmology. Some devotees have literally dedicated their whole lives just to understanding Vedic cosmology. I'm thinking of like Dhanavir Goswami, Sadhaputta Prabhu are two big examples that come to mind. So we won't spend the rest of our Bhakti-śāstrī discussing this cosmology. What I do want to discuss is a general principle though, and this is the way that I tend to think of it. This is my personal way of reconciling the text. You don't need to accept it. It's not the authoritative or anything. My whole ramble up until this point is to say that I don't think there is an authoritative solution. All the solutions are a little bit neither here nor there. The way I understand it is that Srila Prabhupada here he is discussing how Vedic cosmology works, right? And how in Vedic cosmology, we have it is a way of understanding the universe. When we see maps in front of us, if you see a map on the wall, that map is a way of representing the world. The world is not the map, right? If you ever see people, sometimes they will share photos of all the different countries of the world, and they'll share all of them. And the countries are actually done to their actual landmass size. None of the countries are the actual size they look like on a map, because in order to flatten it, you have to play around with the dimensions of the country. We're all familiar with that, right? So a map doesn't actually represent the way the world is, right? Because the world's 3D, right? Even a globe, right, is a flattened sphere. The Earth planet is considered to be a bit more pear-shaped or a bit more flat, right? It's not actually a perfect circle, right? So we're not seeing a perfect representation of the Earth. Why then do we use this? Or even we might remember from high school, or for the Grihastha devotees here, your children, you will know they have the little solar system sets they make, right? And those little solar system sets, those aren't done to scale. If they were done to scale, if you had this, I forgot what it is, but it's something like if the Earth was a golf ball, you'd need like a stadium or something in order to have the actual scale done, right? Something absurd like that. When your kid comes home with his year 9 science solar system, that is not done to scale. Not that I'm trying to pick on anyone's kid, but just by limitations of the physical world, they can't make one to scale, okay? Or in the correct ratios. So what is the point I'm making? We have different models of representing cosmology, and no model is perfect, because the whole point of a model is to simplify what is a very complex reality, right? So in the Vedic model, I like to think of it, it's almost like a map, right? And Vedic cosmology is representing layers of the universe that are higher and lower, right? And it's representing all of these different aspects of reality that are, I mean, forget about just 3-dimensional space. It's trying to convey the different layers of the universe, different dimensions, this and that, right? So the Vedic cosmological system is a model of representing reality. I almost try to just not try to translate scientific cosmology over onto it. That's personally what I do, because they're both different models in order to explain the structure of the universe. Now, why then is Srila Prabhupada smashing the Western scientific cosmology? It's in notice what he says. In your purport, what does he say? He says, it's not accepted in the Vedic literature, right? So the way that I understand it is you have a Vedic structure of the cosmos, right? And what Prabhupada is trying to emphasize is that when we hear about the model of the cosmos that the Vedas has, we shouldn't impose what we've learned in a Western cosmological system. We shouldn't, because then we will misunderstand what it's discussing when it's discussing reality. Right? It's like if I started speaking Hindi using English grammar, I would sound crazy, right? Even though I'm using Hindi words, I'm not using the correct system. I'm not using the correct method in order to construct Hindi sentences. It's the same with Vedic cosmology. If we use Vedic language, but then just think of a secular modern Western cosmology, we are going to create nonsense sentences. So I think Prabhupada here is trying to construct a understanding of Vedic cosmology where we're not mixing the two and accidentally bleeding the two into each other. Now, how do we reconcile the two? I'll leave that as your own homework assignment. Okay, you can if anyone's genuinely interested in this, like I have a few books. I'm happy to send any of you to read into different ways that devotees have wrestled with this, but I don't want to get into it. As I've said, there's a whole Bhakti-śāstrī course just in doing Vedic cosmology. More so, I just want to stress this point. Prabhupada is trying to illustrate a Vedic explanation of the material world and a Vedic model, right? A Vedic model is going to be different than our speculative Western models. I'm not even necessarily saying that that the Western one is wrong, right? I'm just saying it's a different way of creating a system to explain and to see the world around us. Ultimately, none of the models are true because, as is said in the Bhagavatam, in the Chaturshloki of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the only truth that exists is that which is connected to Krishna. The material world, inherently not being directly connected to Krishna, all of these truths are temporary relative truths, right? We accept the Vedic model as better because the Vedic model helps us meditate on Krishna, right? And therefore, it is the most true, okay? So, yeah, I'm getting a question.
Prabhu, I think if you read the original text, that on its own makes sense. Like among the stars, the moon is the most prominent, which means they're talking luminary bodies, and hence you get the context, you see Krishna of all the greatest and all that. I think the fact that in the further enhancements, more lines are added where it is clearly stated that no, it's saying that stars are not the suns and all that, which was not in the original text, though it is correct what they have written, but it is written for people who don't understand things like Surya Siddhanta. They don't understand the Vedic cosmology in a more sort of deeper way, and hence people fall into more confusion. I think if the original had a very big...
by original, which one do you mean? There's a few texts we could be referring to as original.
So the white one, Prabhu.
Oh, so the white one is not the original. The white one is the edited one.
Okay, that one which says among the stars, the moon is the most one.
So I use that one as an example to show that that one was clearly sanitized, right? That one had lots of parts removed, which Prabhupada wanted in the purport for the reason that you're saying. The editor was a little confronted by it, right? Oh. So the editor was a little confronted by it, so he just sort of cut it out.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, but yeah, so you're very correct in what you're noticing. And the editor noticed it as well. And he thought, okay, better not have this in. And he sort of didn't include it. Actually, I don't want to speculate about his mental process, but to me, it seems very likely that's what he was doing. So, no, the original in the sense of the manuscript is the yellowish one here, which is typed out in the typewriter style writing. Now you might say, why don't we just print exactly this? And that's because Prabhupada wanted these to be edited into nicely presented books, right? Srila Prabhupada was very clear. He wanted these transcripts to be turned into well-edited books, okay? And that's why we have that first edit in the first place, okay? That's the reason why we don't publish these original ones. Also because we've lost the original audio tapes for a lot of them, just because the quality wasn't too good. We have them for Krishna book though. So if you want to hear, you can hear Prabhupada reciting the whole Krishna book. Okay. So generally what I try to remember is that these are different ways of understanding the material world. The material world is a relative place. It is full of relative truths. The truths of the material world are here today, gone tomorrow. The only way that the material world has any lasting truth is if it's connected to Krishna. Vedic cosmology helps us connect to Krishna more because its cosmology is centered around Krishna. Vedic cosmology also says the sun goes around the earth. Of course, that's not a major issue at all for modern science, because modern science believes that you can do it either way, right? Because of relativity, right? But people get in a pickle about it. But actually, Vedic cosmology doesn't say that the earth goes around the sun or that the sun goes around the earth. It says that everything revolves around Krishna. Why do we accept Vedic cosmology? Because it is a way of interpreting cosmology. It is a way of interpreting the world around us that makes us directly connected to Krishna. And therefore, it is the most valuable system. If it didn't connect us to Krishna, it would just be another cosmology, okay? And cosmologies are all relative. The whole nature of the material world is that truth is different today and it's different tomorrow, right? We're learning different things, we're understanding different things, we're having different, there is no solid truth to the material world. The only solid truth that exists is that Krishna dances, okay? That is the only solid truth. And again, Vedic cosmology connects us to it. These are two different ways of constructing the universe, and we shouldn't mix the systems. We can try to reconcile the systems, but we shouldn't mix them. And Prabhupada is being very clear to do this. Don't try to blend the systems together. You can try to reconcile them by understanding them independently, but don't make like a kitschy mixture of the two. And that's why Prabhupada, he is smashing that in the original. He's saying, we do not accept this in the Vedic literature. We do not accept this model. Maybe there's a way of seeing how there are different ways of looking at reality, right? Maybe that's the case. But we shouldn't try to smash them together like people try to do. That's more what Srila Prabhupada's getting at here. Again, in terms of reconciling those systems, that's something you can do in your own time. Again, if somebody does want any of those books, just WhatsApp message me. I'll forward some interesting books that have been written. I don't necessarily agree with any of them really, but at least you'll see how devotees have tried to reconcile them. Okay, there's our cosmology thing. And also of those devotees who left, I was only joking that they're leaving because of cosmology. They all told me before that they'll have to leave early today. So although I'm sure me talking about cosmology didn't make them want to stay. Okay, so there's our cosmology discussion. It actually is a very, very fun topic, but it's very dry and technical. If you want to see a really wonderful description just of the Vedic system, not of reconciling the two, and because Ghanashyam Prabhu is such an amazing speaker, he did an amazing seminar at the beginning of lockdown where he went through and he broke down the structure of the universe in Vedic cosmology. It's really, really well done. It's based on some research that had been done by Govardhan Eco Village, Bhaktivedanta Vidyapith. I've read the book that he based it on, and it's a really, really thoroughly researched book, and that presentation is amazing as well. So if you want to just get the Vedic version, not worrying about reconciling it, I'd really recommend that YouTube series on Vedic cosmology. And beyond that, yeah, I can share anything later on regarding reconciling the two. Okay, if that's everything on cosmology, we can keep on going.
Is that series on Radha Gopinath?
Yeah, it's on ISKCON Sydney YouTube channel.
Okay, thank you.
You can look up Vedic cosmology or something. There's not too many videos named that. Okay, yeah, but that's just an explanation purely of the Vedic system. Yeah, okay. So I hope I didn't cause anyone a crisis of faith there. But I didn't want to overstate the easiness of that text. As compared to other texts, most of them are misunderstood. This one is genuinely just a little bit of a complex issue. Can we keep on going? Or because I feel like we should address all cosmology stuff in one go, and then wrap that gift up and send it away. Okay, let's keep on going then. Okay, then. Okay, but then let us actually think now that we've had that long detour, let us think about what this text is saying. Is the thing I was mentioning before. Whenever we see the lights in the sky, we should think of the sun, right? We should think of how wonderful the sun is, and therefore we should remember Krishna. Anytime you see the sun, anytime you see the sky now, you should think, oh, how opulent is Krishna? How wonderful is Krishna, right? This is what we should think. We might also think oh, how complex is Vedic cosmology? But that's not what we should be thinking. We should be thinking, how wonderful is Krishna? Whenever we see the stars at night, right? Whenever we see the stars at night, we should see them. We should see the moon as well, right? And we should think, how beautiful is the moon, right? How wonderful is the moon? Oh, therefore, how wonderful is Krishna, right? We should try understand all of these things, okay? And that is the point of the text. And this is the meditation you should have. Okay, let's go a little bit quicker now. Text 22, let's have Tarun Prabhu, actually. Would you like to say it?
Yes, Prabhu. Of the Vedas, I am the Samaveda. Of the demigods, I am Indra, the king of heaven. Of the senses, I am the mind. And in living beings, I am the living force, consciousness.
Jai. So we should think, again, as I said, I've stopped my screen sharing. So as we hear these, we should really visualize them, right? We can think of the Vedas being recited, and of them, Krishna is the Samaveda, right? The Samaveda, for those of you who don't know, it's very, has anyone heard the Samaveda being recited? It's very different to the other ones. Vedic Sanskrit is like Chinese or Punjabi, actually. It has tones. It's a little bit more complex than Punjabi, but it has tones when you speak. So I'm sure we've all heard Chinese people speak. It's very tonal, up, down, up, down. Vedic Sanskrit is like that as well. You need these tones in order to communicate what you're saying, right? That's why you'll hear them go, hari, he, like that, right? It's not because they're just singing for fun. They're conveying the tones, right? And the Samaveda in particular has the most complex set of tones. And therefore, it's actually a little bit like hearing music. I'll try and find a YouTube recitation. I heard the recitation in person, but I'll try and find a YouTube recitation and send it into the WhatsApp group. It sounds musical because the tones are so complex. And therefore, yeah,
Prabhu, they speak in absolute pure Sanskrit. Like each letter of Sanskrit can be recited in 8 ways. Like can be said in 8 ways, like like they have 8. And each of that has got a meaning, whether you are speaking or you are being humble or you are all that.
Yeah, and not just tone, but meaning as well. That's why you'll sometimes see in Sanskrit, you'll find one word and it has like 7 different meanings. Often those different meanings were distinguished based on how you tonally, on how you tonally recited it. So because of that, it's very musical. So what is Krishna saying? He's saying, of the Vedas, I'm the Samaveda. The Samaveda is musical, it's beautiful, right? And so therefore, when we hear the beautiful music of the Samaveda, we should think of all the Vedas, this is the most musical and beautiful one, and therefore, here is Krishna's opulence being reflected, right? Among the demigods, Krishna is, well, he's identifying with Indra, right? Again, this isn't saying that he's literally Indra. Who is Indra? He is the king of the demigods. And therefore, he is Indra, right? And of all the senses, Krishna is the mind, okay? Of all the senses, he is the mind. What does that mean? The mind is the hardest of all the senses to control, right? And therefore, Krishna is the mind, because the mind is the strongest of the senses. And of all the living entities, and in all living entities, he is the consciousness. He is the Cheta, right? The Chetana, right? What does this mean? What is the point of a living being is defined by them being conscious. When the consciousness leaves, then a person is dead. They're no longer a living being. So Krishna is the very definition of life in all living beings. Next text, let's have Srinivas Prabhu. Would you like to say?
Yes, Prabhuji. Text 23, translation. Of all the Rudras, I am Lord Shiva. Of the Yakshas and Rakshasas, I am the Lord of Wealth, Kuvera. Of the Vasus, I am fire, Agni. And of mountains, I am Meru. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Jai. So this one is relatively straightforward, right? Krishna is identified with these. Kuvera, as we know, Kuvera is the leader of the Yakshas and the Rakshasas. So similar to of demigods, I am Indra, right? Kuvera is a Yaksha though. He's not a Rakshasa, in case you're wondering. Later on, we'll see Krishna says, of demons, I am Prahlad Maharaj. And I remember once I saw a video, this one fundamentalist Christian preacher, he had a Bhagavad-gītā, and he said, see here, Krishna, he is saying, of demons, I am this demon. And he said, therefore, Krishna is a demon. So all of these people worshipping Krishna, they are all worshipping a demon. That's what this and I think somebody in the YouTube comments beat me to it, and they said just to inform you, Prahlad is not actually demonic. So we find a similar sort of aspect here.
Similar experience, Prabhuji. So one of the person who just read somewhere Krishna said that I'm out of some liquor, I'm the wine, something like that.
Yeah.
And someone is reading that particular text saying, see, look, even Krishna saying that he is wine. So we are allowed to drink the wine.
My favorite one that I ever heard of, if we're tangenting, because I've realized we won't have time to get through all of them today anyways. I remember once I was talking to one devotee, and we were going around, and he was spending so much money buying all of these things, telling me all of the things he's bought, like, really, really nice stuff. And I was like, wow. I said, you're spending a lot of money, like Jai, I wasn't saying in a judgmental way, I was just pointing it out. And he said, yes, Srila Prabhupada said we shouldn't hoard money. So I'm buying as many things as I can. So yeah, we find some interesting speculations about Vedic information. Okay, that's a funny story. Okay, text 23, maybe Sri Mataji can, 24, Sri Mataji can illuminate us.
Of priests, O Arjuna, know me to be the chief, Brihaspati. Of generals, I am Kartikeya, and of bodies of water, I am the ocean.
Jai. So this one is, again, anytime you see the ocean now, you should think, right? Of all, like, the ocean itself is such an overwhelming experience. I right now I'm in a beach town. I grew up in a beach town. And so I'm very familiar with the ocean, right? Every day for my whole life, I've seen the ocean multiple times, right? And even now, even if I still go, probably if you added up all the hours, I've probably seen like multiple days worth of just hours, of just seeing the ocean. Oh, definitely more than that, right? And even now still, if I go and see the ocean, I'm just thinking, oh, what a huge, what an impressive thing. Krishna is the same, right? Krishna is the same, deep and infinite like the ocean, right? We think of all of the depths. Again, this is very practical. If you ever do a japa walk on the beach and you can just look at the ocean and it can just remind you of how deep and infinite Krishna is. But what is Krishna an ocean of? Bhakti rasa, right? Bhakti rasamrita sindhu. The Bhakti rasamrita sindhu is the book, but it is also referring to Krishna himself, right? Krishna is an ocean, right? He's an ocean of love and affection, right? And of infinite beauty. So again, we should take this as a reminder of Krishna. Once, I forgot which devotee it was, but somebody said, I think it was Ravindra Sarup Prabhu. They said, surely you don't think God is actually blue, right? Blue like the ocean, right? And then he said, I do think that, but the blue that Krishna is the true blue. The blue that we're seeing in the ocean is not as blue as the blue Krishna is. Krishna is a bluer blue than blueness itself, right? Krishna is everything, but in a deeper sense. Once, I think it was Srila Prabhupada who said this. Prabhupada, he pointed to a blue. He said that it is not that Krishna is the color of the sky, it is that the sky is the color of Krishna, right? We should understand this is the relationship between these things. It's all centered on Krishna. Aham sarvasya prabhavo, right? It's all centered on Krishna. It's not centered somewhere else, right? It's not that Krishna saw the sky one day or Krishna saw the monsoon cloud and said, wow, I really would like to look like this monsoon cloud. It's such a nice monsoon cloud, right? The monsoon cloud has the privilege of being used in order to describe the color of Krishna. That's the way that it works. Okay, the rest of it is pretty straightforward, right? Brihaspati, as we know, he takes a very prominent role among the demigods as the priest of the demigods, etc., etc. Kartikeya, again, I think we can just keep on going. Maybe Varun Prabhu, would you like to say text 25?
O the great sages, I am Brigu. Of vibrations, I am the transcendental Om. Of sacrifices, I am the chanting of the holy names, Japa. And Of immovable things, I am the Himalayas.
Jai. So there's a few points to be made here. One is that people, often I get people on the street, they'll say, where in Bhagavad-Gītā does it say to chant? Where in Bhagavad-Gītā does it say to chant? They'll say, I don't know if any of you have experienced this before. They'll say, where is chanting in the Bhagavad-Gītā? They'll say, you can say there's glorifying the Lord, but chanting, you guys are running around, you're saying you're a movement of Bhagavad-Gītā, and all you're doing is chanting. Bhagavad-Gītā says this, Bhagavad-Gītā says that, right? What is Krishna saying here? Among all sacrifices, japa is the greatest. So we should take that. We should try and internalize that, right? Among all sacrifices, japa is the greatest. So Krishna here, he's directly glorifying, right? He's directly glorifying the nature. In Manipuri culture, the Manipuris became Gauriya Vaishnavas, I think in the times of Narottam Das Thakur, at the latest. At the latest, it was in the time of Narottam Das Thakur and co, right? And so we've been, of course, I'm Manipuri, right? We've at least in name, we've been Gauriya Vaishnava for a long while. So whenever I go and I visit my relatives, it's very interesting. I hear about the traditional Manipuri style of Gauriya Vaishnavism is a little bit different than in our line. The philosophy, at least as far as I understand, is exactly the same, but obviously the practices are different. So often I'll speak to like the different pujaris and Brahmins and all in the Manipuri community, right? And so I was speaking to one of them, and I still remember he was showing me how he performs weddings, right? And he was just telling me about it. And I said, oh, what are you doing here? What are you doing there? And then at one point I was asking all these questions, and he said, oh, it doesn't even matter anyways. The whole point, the whole yajna here is that we're all chanting, right? He said, this fire here, he said, stop asking me so many questions. I think I was also annoying him a bit, but he was saying, stop asking me so many questions. He said, the main yajna in the wedding is the chanting of Hare Krishna. The fire is just here for fun, right? Of course, he didn't mean it. He was just trying to make a point. The fire is not just there for fun. It's not that yajnas are a game, right? But he was just he was trying to emphasize the point. The central yajna is the chanting of the holy names, right? Again, it's not Gauriya Vaishnava speculation. So japa, right, is the greatest of all sacrifices. Okay, 1 second, let me see. My battery is running low. I have enough time. If the class randomly ends, it's because I've run out of charge. Okay, so let's keep on going. I think everything else makes sense. The Himalayas, if any of you have ever seen them, very hard to move. Again, as I said, just try to internalize the image. I think a lot of these are very self-explanatory, but if we can take some time to really meditate and visualize them, it can really deepen our appreciation of Krishna. Okay, let's go now, text 26, Uma Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji. Of all trees, I am the banyan tree, and of the sages among the demigods, I am Narada. Of the Gandharvas, I am Chitraratha, and among perfected beings, I am the sage Kapila. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Very nice. So here, this one, again, the banyan tree or the pipala tree, they are considered to be representatives of Vishnu, and therefore they consider the greatest of trees, and therefore Krishna is identified as them. Among the sages, Narad Muni. Who is Narad Muni among the sages? He is the devotee among the sages, and therefore the devotee is the greatest, right? Among the Gandharvas, Chitraratha. Chitraratha, as we know, he is the sweetest singer of all the Gandharvas, and therefore Krishna, he has identified himself as that. And then among perfected beings, Kapila Dev, right? Because of course, again, maybe that's a Bhagavatam thing, but yeah, you can look into his fame as a great mystic. Okay, text 27, Srikanta Sena Prabhu.
27?
27.
Of horses.
Uchai yeah.
Yeah. Of horses, know me to be Uchai produced during the churning of the ocean for nectar. Of lordly elephants, I am Aravata, and among men, I am the monarch.
Jai, amazing. So here we find, again, of all horses, that which is arisen from the nectar ocean, the nectarian ocean is the most significant, right? The elephants also, what is the special nature of the elephant that is listed?
Indra's elephant. It's got 4 tusks. It's fully white. Can fly.
Yes. And yeah, exactly. And to my knowledge, I'm pretty sure he also arose from the great nectar ocean, right? Yeah. So we can find both of these, right? Very special among all of these animals. Okay, text 28. Shri Mataji. Oh no, I already asked Shri Mataji. Katyayani Mataji.
Text 28 translation. Of weapons, I am the thunderbolt. Among cows, I am the surabhi. Of causes for procreation, I am Kandarpa, the god of love. And of serpents, I am Vasuki. Thank you, Prabhu.
So here we find, again, weapons, thunderbolt. This makes sense. Then among cows, the Kamadhenu. The Kamadhenu offers, is like the desire tree, right? Gives all of the desires, and that is the nature of Krishna, right? Krishna is giving all of these things to all of his devotees. Then lastly, we have the question of lust, right? Of lust, I'm the lust for producing an offspring, right? This is how Baladev Vidyabhushan renders it in his translation. And the point that's being made here is in the Sanskrit, we'll see the word cha is used. Cha. That means it is not just lust for the sake of lust's sake, not just lust for the sake of engaging in sexual relations. It is lust which is used for being productive, for being procreative, not destructive or mode of passion, but mode of goodness, right? Where you're saying, I wish to engage in this activity in order to produce children, in order to create something, right? And that is the best form of lust, right? Why? Because it's doing something productive for society. It's doing something productive, providing bodies for the living entities. It's not just lust for sense gratification's sake. Okay, I think we'll stop on that text because my battery's getting low and we've hit 11:59, at least on my clock. So are there any questions I just wanted to take before we wrap up regarding the assignment or anything we've covered? Okay. Well, I thank you all for putting up with me being late. And when I'm back in Sydney next week, it'll all be a bit more stable in schedule. I will get your feedback back to you ASAP. My big apologies for taking so long. And yeah, I look forward to reading all your assignments, but they're all due. We'll have one class before then, right? So they're due the Monday after next week. Yep, thank you all. I look forward to seeing all of you then. The homework is do the assignments, finish chapter 11 if you haven't finished chapter 11. Okay, so finish chapter 11 and then do the assignments. I won't set any readings, just get them done. Okay, well, have a nice week. Nantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.